Good morning. Today we're talking about SOS Form 257. What's important about this form is when you're trying to get your license back, this is the part that you fill out. So I always tell people don't fill out Form 257 until you've seen me and we've done the evaluation and the drug screen and I've sent that back to you. So fill this out with that eval in front of you because they're asking you the same information 4 times on the evaluation, on the Form SOS 257, in the letters that you get of support, and at the hearing itself. Now this form on the front page tells you everything that you need to do, including the letters, and I'm going to briefly talk about that. The letters need to be signed, dated, notarized, and have your last drink and or drug date on them, and contact information for the person. It asks for other things like how the person knows you, how often they see you, and that's important too. But one thing they don't specifically ask for is your last drink date, but they want it. The hearing officers want at least a month, a year that you last used. And if you're off, and sometimes people will guess at that, and they can be off by a few months or a couple of years, it might not seem like a big deal to you if it was 10 years ago, but it's a big deal to the hearing officer because if you're claiming 2 more years of sobriety than you actually have, you're done. You're done before the hearing even starts. So it's very important that you know when you had your last drink or your last drug, and that your letters are signed, dated, notarized, have the last drink date on them, and contact information for the person writing the letter. The rest of this information, most of it, is the same information that is asked for in the evaluation. So that's why I suggest that you sit down with the eval in front of you, and if you have an attorney, in your attorney's presence, so that he can fact check it as you're going through it, and that you get all of your information lining up. All of your evidence has to line up all 4 times they ask it, or you'll probably be denied a license. Now, the first page, or actually page 2 on the evaluation, is contact information for you. So that's the same information that's in your evaluation. They ask for your name, address, date of birth, driver's license number, telephone number. And then contact information for your attorney. So if you're represented by counsel, then he has to fill that part out of it, or you have to fill it out for him if you know that information. And the next page is actually page 3, is background information, and they ask how long you've lived in Michigan, where you lived before you came to Michigan, and if you're not a Michigan resident, why did you leave Michigan, when did you leave Michigan. So they want to know where else you've lived, basically, and they're going to check and see if there's a record of you in other states. These days all the states are connected by internet, so it's not like you can get a DUI in one state and go to another state. They don't allow that anymore. Then they ask for your conviction history. Now this is the same information that is asked for on Form 258, or the evaluation that I do. And what's important here is that you list all of your convictions that had anything to do with alcohol or drugs. That's not just DUIs. That means things like, did you get a drug trafficking arrest? Did you get a minor possession? All of these things are actually criminal offenses. Even though they might seem very minor, the hearing officer will have this information and he expects you to be forthcoming with it. If you're not forthcoming, then he's not going to consider you to be honest about your history, and therefore not very credible in terms of what you're telling him. Section 4 on page 4 is your substance use history. And then again, it asks for your offense dates, and it asks if you've ever been incarcerated and for what. Again, a lot of people have various backgrounds, and just because you have an arrest or conviction for something that may have been pretty serious, such as drug trafficking, where you might have done time for that, doesn't mean that you're not going to be eligible to get your license back. The key thing that hearing officers are concerned about is your substance abuse behind you? They want to be confident that you are sober and plan to stay sober. So that's a lot more important than whether or not you've committed serious offenses. And then they ask, again, for your use of alcohol, controlled substances, when you use them, the last time you use them. So one of the things we do on Form 258 is we say, what is your last date of use for a substance, each substance that you used. For example, if it's a different day for cocaine, and another day for marijuana, and another day for alcohol, then we have to have all three of those dates. And it has to match up with what you tell them here. And this is important, even though you may not know the exact information. Even AA members frequently will only keep track of their last drink date or the last date they used any substance recreationally. So you may be guessing to some degree at the answers for when you last used marijuana or cocaine or heroin or whatever else you may have used. However, what's important is if you guess, you have to guess the same thing every time. As I tell people, this is the gospel according to you. Once it's on paper, you can't change it, and you have to remember it. So it's very important that you be precise. The hearing officer is a lawyer, and he will want precise information. You can't just wing it. Then they will ask for your treatment history. Again, this is the same information that you have already given me in the evaluation that we did. So, to the best of your ability, tell them any treatment that you've been through, substance abuse or psychological treatment, counseling that may or may not have involved alcohol or drugs is important. And if you have a co-occurring diagnosis such as a history of depression or something like that, they want to know that that condition is under control also. So it's going to be very important that you include any treatment that you've done, and if you are in treatment for, say, depression, or you have been, they want some kind of proof that that treatment has concluded successfully. It's very important that you tell them everything you've done, because this is what you have done specifically to address the problem. So any counseling that you've had inpatient, it doesn't matter if you went back to drinking afterward or outpatient, cumulatively this information or this counseling has resulted in where you are today. So eventually you got the message. They're also asking for your involvement in self-help group, and it's very important that you tell them, for example, what meetings you go to, how often you go to AA meetings, who your sponsor is. Again, all of that information is asked for both in my evaluation and Form 257. And then they ask for continuum of care. If you're continuing to do anything at this time to address your issues with substance abuse, then they want to know what that is. And they want details as to how frequently you go. And if you, as I always tell people, 12-step groups are a two-edged sword. If you're going to a 12-step group, you have to be able to know something about it. You should know who the founders of AA were, for example. You should be able to give them or tell them the Serenity Prayer, recite it for them. You should be able to talk about how you've worked the steps, which part of the program has been most helpful to you, and give them a credible story about your involvement at the present time. If you can't do that, then they may assume that you are just going to meetings and taking up space and getting your slip signed, or maybe not even going to the meeting, but going to the bar and having somebody at the bar sign your slip. even if your attorney has a copy, there's no guarantee that you're going to use the same attorney next year. You may decide to go by yourself to get your full license restored. Typically they give you a restricted license for the first year with a breathalyzer. If you go by yourself, you're going to need a copy of this information to make sure that your next evaluation matches up with your first evaluation. So you send them everything, you keep a copy of everything, and then you're ready for the hearing. Make sure that you read it over before you go for the hearing, and that you know everything that's in it, because your answers at the hearing have to match up with what you've said in Form 257 and 258, and the letters that you get of support. And if everything is in order and you've done what you need to do to address the problem, you have a very good chance of being awarded a license. Thank you.
Awesome.